On this episode,
Hello, Wargamers. I hope you're doing great this week. Unfortunately, I am not. After my last video where I painted some Starship Trooper inspired miniatures, Mark, the designer of those miniatures, who runs the Popsicles brand, he's an STL designer. We have collaborated in a couple things, so he's a really good buddy. And he asked me to paint some of his Democracy Troopers, and well, they are helldivers inspired miniatures. And well, basically I said, yes, sure, why not? Let's paint for democracy. It's our duty. So I started looking at the color scheme, as I started looking at the models, and I said, this is gonna be a walk in the park. This is just black with some gray and some yellow. It's gonna be easy to paint. So the main goal with this and the difficulty painting black and yellow started to show during the process. In the end, I finished up with the test model taking me over 2.5 hours, just because I was trying different things. I was trying painting it gray, then using a wash, then starting from black, using like some accents. Nothing really worked, and in the end, you know my drill. If I take too long on a miniature, it doesn't work for me because I want to game with them. I want them to be available to wargame. So if I take 2 or 3 hours for each miniature and I need 40 of them, it's not going to really work for wargaming. So I was looking for an easy process to show you guys so you could follow and basically get a Helldiver inspired army by Popsicles on the table. And well, basically I think I succeeded, but it was some of the most frustrating steps I have ever designed. Painting yellow, I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it can be very tedious. I will show you the process right now. And also, it's really hard to paint a black miniature that you're looking from 3 feet away when you're playing, and prevent it from looking like a black blob that is just walking around, as if you didn't even did anything to paint it. So I think I succeeded. Take a look at it, you will be the judge. And as always, if you have any questions or you want to say anything, leave it in the comments. I'll be more than glad to help you.
welcome, Wargamers. Dry brushing.
So it all begins, as many miniature painting stories begin, with the miniature primed in black. In this case, it's necessary because we're gonna do our black as our main color, and we're gonna do a very heavy underbrush, or what I used to know as heavy dry brush. But some guys corrected me and say that this kind of super saturated dry brushing is usually referred to as underbrushing. I did not know that. I used to call it just heavy dry brushing. But basically, you just have to do that. Remember, try to be directional, and that is it. All divers went to this process until they looked exactly like flower-colored men. And well, you can see pretty much all details are popping off, and that is exactly what we want before we move to the next step.
Washes.
And so far, this is gonna be our easiest job. We're just gonna add some army painter stack tone throughout the whole miniature. That'll give us our basic contrasts between the black and the gray that forms, dark gray that forms. So then we're gonna move to our next step.
Metallics.
And finally, this is where the real job begins. We're gonna add some gunmetal. It's really important that it's a darker tone of metal so that it won't contrast too much between the armor and the miniature. And basically what we're trying to do here is emulate some of the styles of the first edition of Helldivers, which had like a more grayish armor. But we're gonna add some wash later to keep it kind of dark. We don't want it too dark because we do want to create contrast between the armor and the rest of the miniature. So we're gonna be careful as always, just loading the tip of the brush and making sure that only the parts that we wanted to be highlighted are highlighted, and make sure that none of the contrast that it's on the low recesses of the miniature, the deeper recesses of the miniature, are painted by mistake. So be very careful because this is basically a practice for the next step, which is going to be very delicate highlighting. So be careful. And the parts that we're going to paint metallic are the chest plate, the leg braces, the shoulder pads, the arm braces, and the skulls. If you want to do the metallic, in the end I ended up doing them white, but if you want, you can also do the skulls in a metallic tone. And we're also going to paint the buckles in metallic, as well as the weapons, which I forgot to mention. So all of those items are going to go in metallic. Again, use and we're going to continue with the metallics, try to leave the contrast of the black, and just keep at it, doing it carefully, taking our time to avoid any mistakes down the line. So we're going to try to keep as much as the recesses dark to keep the balance of the miniature, the contrast of the miniature. And then we're gonna try out a little method that I used to paint the skulls on the shoulder pads and the chest. In the end, I ended up covering the skulls in white, but in the beginning I was gonna do them silver, or this dark metal, this gunmetal. And the way I did it is basically I remove most of the excess from the brush, try to paint somewhere else or something else, and then right when I know that there's only a small amount of paint in the brush, I pass it around the skull very, very carefully. This is basically like doing a mini micro dry brush on the small details of a miniature. If you make sure to do this, just blow the brush by the tip, like I always tell you, and remove most of the excess paint from it. You will be able to paint small details like this with no problem.
The torture of painting yellow.
And sadly, this is where the frustrating part of these miniatures came in, which is preparing the yellow. Now, many people struggle with the yellow because they don't have a base for it, and they struggle the yellow to cover whatever it's below it, because yellow, it's a very transparent color, so it will take the properties of the color that it's below it. In this case, we need an opaque enough color that it will cover whatever it's below the yellow, but that it fits with the yellow scheme. So the natural shadow of any yellow or any gold is brown. So we're gonna do that. You can also mix it up a little bit. I've seen people do a purplish brownish color, stuff like that. What you're looking for, it's an opaque enough color so that it will fit with the yellow, but it will cover whatever it's below it. And that is how you prepare your yellows. You will not struggle to make the yellow stick to the brown or to like a purplish brown. But in this case, it was frustrating because I had to follow every little line on the model. And I mean, these models are great. They are amazing, designed by Mark. But in the end, the very nature of the design means that I just had to paint a bunch of yellow stripes. And I did some of them freehand, like the vertical stripes on the cape, the vertical stripes on the helmet. And pretty much wherever I knew that I was gonna use a yellow, I prepared it by painting it brown. So we did the sides of the leg braces, the knee pads, the arm braces, the shoulder pads, the cape, and I also wanted to break down a little bit of the black with black with black, or black with gray. So I also added the bags and the belt in brown. I think they don't break away from the miniature, and I just wanted to paint some part of the miniature in a color other than yellow, black, or gray. So I just painted the belt and the bags brown, just differing a little bit from the video game. Don't judge me there. And we're also going to do like a freehand quickie. Basically, I wanted the cape to have some symbols. I've seen in the game that you can add your custom symbols. I didn't want to go too fancy, so I just added like a downward arrow. Again, since this is going to go yellow, I have to do it in brown to prepare it. And I added some contrast there with a diluted black with some gray, just to keep the cape from flowing, because the wash had basically blocked everything. So that is the design. I paused the pic so you could see it, and that is what we're going to do in yellow further down the process. So everything that you want to go yellow in the miniature, you'll have to prepare it with brown. And we're gonna do a small intersection here, because I want to show you how you can prepare your paint, or how you can mix some colors to get a desired result. I have shown you in the past how I dilute my paints, how I combine them in a dry palette, and you can see the full tutorials that I've made, the whole list in the description. But right now I want to show you how I make a transition, and this is pretty basic stuff, but it will serve us to paint the yellow. And a while ago, like a couple of minutes ago, you saw me correct some of the cape that was too black because it was too colored by the wash. So I did it with a mixture of black and gray. Now granted, this palette has too much water, so be careful with that. Your paint shouldn't be so runny. This palette just has too much water, and since this was just only an example, I didn't want to waste more paint, more paper, and all of that. What I'm trying to show you here is how we can create a transitional tone just mixing two tones. In this case, I want like a yellow that will be the transition between the brown we painted and the final yellow we do. With this kind of 50-50 mixture, we're gonna cover the browns that we prepared in the last step. So right now I was questioning my sanity after finishing the 5 helldivers with all their brown trimmings and all of that. Now it's time to really start adding all the extra details. It's pretty much the last step. All of this final step is going to be accents. We're going to do the visor in a blue because we want the visor to break away from the black with gray with black with black. And then we're going to start adding our transitional tone that we mixed in the last step on top of the brown that we created. Everywhere that you painted brown, you will now paint with that transitional tone. Now, sometimes you can get away with just painting with the transitional tone instead of preparing the yellow with the brown, and that will probably save you a step. But in this case, I tried it, and the transitional yellow wasn't opaque enough, and you could still see the metallic go through the yellow. So it wasn't gonna work, so I had to prepare the yellow, adding the brown, and then I'm correcting any mistakes that I made wherever I want the yellow to go, and then boom, we'll start adding the yellow. And pretty much this is like the final step. There's no shortcut here. We're gonna have to apply all the techniques that I've shown you in the past videos. Please go back to them. I'm still missing some of your feedback. Watch them. Load the brush just by the tip. Don't overload your brush, and just try to hold the miniature in a way that prevents you from shaking, and go to town. Paint all those little details and trimmings carefully. Now, a confession that I have to make is that I actually tried to do a speed paint on these guys. Try to cut down the process to about 40 minutes on each one of these guys, and I just couldn't do it. I failed miserably because this kind of work has to be done very precisely, carefully, and there are no shortcuts here. So I did it in the end. I spent about an hour, 10 minutes on the final guys. On the first one it took me like 2 hours because I was just testing a bunch of stuff. But on the last ones I spent about an hour, which I think is a reasonable time for some wargaming miniatures. And well, just try to keep your sanity, paint one trimming at a time. If it becomes too heavy, just try to focus on one part at a time. The leg braces, the knee pads, do them in a series if that works for you, and just that. At every little part of yellow where you painted brown, very carefully. Now, something I don't think I have discussed, or I didn't discuss enough, is the idea of an eraser brush. An eraser brush is basically a clean brush that you keep around to pick up the paint where you make a mistake. There, I picked up the paint where I made a mistake, and I just corrected the metallic. When you're trying to do this like small detail, this very delicate trimming, you're gonna make mistakes. It's a very good idea to keep a clean brush just to pick up the excess paint when you make a mistake before it dries. So have it really handy and just keep at it. There are no shortcuts here. And for example, this is the part where I covered the freehand that I did. And I'm really sorry for the unfocused cam. I didn't realize when I was painting it. And it's basically just me covering over the design I made with the brown. Now, also a reason we do it with a brown is because we can actually cover it with black really easily. And it will give us a guideline on how we want to do the freehand design. I painted on the 5 guys the same design because I really didn't have enough creativity, or I didn't think of anything else that I could add to them. So I did like this small pointing downward arrow that I thought looked cool on the capes, and that's pretty much it. It's me just covering it in yellow, trying to add the transitional color and the final yellow as a highlight, and that's pretty much it. And really, this is the part where men are separated from children, where the noobs are separated from the pros. We're gonna paint the skulls on the chest, shoulders, and the back of the cape in white. Now, the white that I have, it's pretty decent in the sense that it covers relatively well. it was very diluted here, and I just made 3 parallel lines trying to keep the shape of the wings, and I didn't want to clog the detail, so the paint was super thin, and I didn't struggle with any, or I didn't regret any thick lines, because I ended up covering them with black and then recorrecting them with white. So what I wanted just was to not oversaturate the detail with too much paint. So everything was super diluted, where the paint wasn't runny, but that it was super thin, and I had to go the 3 parallel lines simulating the wing. I did use the model as guideline because the model has those parts like protruding from the model, but in the end, I mean, you just have to pass the brush very, very carefully if you don't want to make a mistake. So when you already have like your base, you can use a little thicker paint on top of the lines that you painted before, and you're gonna paint the skull the same way that I described before, which is just basically removing the excess paint from the brush and passing it in a downward fashion as if you were doing a dry brush on the skull. It's tedious and it takes a while, but it's really the only way that I know to do it. Here you see me doing it in the cape, and to be honest, after the 3rd one I was pretty fast at it. This is like my 3rd attempt, I believe, and by the 5th I was just breezing through it. I mean, not breezing, it still took me a couple minutes, but you get what I'm saying. There, you can't really see it, but a lot of this isn't gonna be black. It's gonna be the grayish black that we mixed previously, and it's not gonna read like that because like the camera can't really pick it up, but I'm just adding more contrast to the flows of the cape, and that way it won't read as full black. So I'm adding just some gray as highlights on the helmet, and just trying to make sure that each part reads as something different.
Final step. Thank God.
And really, this is like the light at the end of the tunnel, at least for me. You just add a little bit of dark tone to the armor parts, and just you want them to mix up better with the rest of the miniature, and it will still read off as metal, so pretty much you have that part of contrast completed. And it will also help you highlight a little bit more the details that you painted, and it will fix some of the mistakes you will probably have made with the trim. So you just add a bunch of dark tone on top of the armor, being careful that it doesn't stain the yellow, but making sure that it frames it. And that's just about it. Something that I also forgot to record was adding some blue wash or a blue ink on the visor, so that it would darken it a little bit, because we used a very light blue on it, and that would pretty much finish up the miniature. You can see me there just highlighting the trims, because I probably made a mistake on the dark tone, and I just wanted it to pop off more. And well, it seems that I had forgotten to actually paint that part yellow. So that was it. This is the process that I used to paint the helldivers, and I hope that it's useful for you. And if you're thinking about doing a full army of these, leave it in the comment. Do you feel ready for the challenge? It was mentally draining for me, but maybe for you it will not be. So if you have any more questions, you want to say anything, leave it in the comments. I'll be more than happy to read them.